This is Conscious Coffee, where you always have a seat at the table. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Conscious Coffee. So this episode is going to be a solo episode as Sharon is busy this week. But I really wanted to just come on here and do an episode that let you into my heart space and to show you, well, to explain to you as to why this podcast, right? It has lived in my heart and in my head for at least 8 years that I know of now. So yeah, and I know a lot of times when people start a podcast or start any sort of social media and come on and try and talk about healing, we kind of think, why her or why them? You know, what makes them qualified to talk about this? And not that I really feel the need to explain myself at this point in my life. I do want to create some connection and relatability with you, the audience, and really to let you know that to anyone else who may have struggled with something along the lines of any of the multiple experiences that I have been through, that you know that you're not alone. And that no matter what you've been through, no matter what you've done, that it is never too late to change and to turn your life around. It takes a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of mindfulness, dedication. And for those of you who've been in recovery or are in recovery, I'm sure you've heard the phrase, sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that's exactly what I was. I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was not good to myself. I was not good to the people around me that I loved the most and that loved me the most. I've hurt just so many people and feel a deep amount of regret and remorse for that still to this day. I have definitely come to terms with a lot of it. But yeah, so we'll get into that. But so yeah, just kind of wanted to outline this episode for you and set the tone. And I'll do my best to keep it light and not so heavy, because probably 15 years of my life were actually really good. But the last 15 years were not that great. I had some really good moments, a lot of love, experienced a deep love that to me, I hope it was, I know that my feelings on my side, they were actually genuine love, you know, and I've experienced just an array of different experiences, different emotions, different life lessons that I absolutely had to learn to be the woman that I am today. And I think I might have said this before, but you know, I like that woman. I love myself today, and it's taken a lot to be where I'm at. And so, yeah, I just wanted to come on here and I want to share this with you guys. I want to share my heart. I want to share my story. So just bear with me. And again, I'm very, very grateful for you being here. So as always, let's start with taking our collective sip of coffee, tea, whatever your drink of choice is. Sad we don't have Sharon's gargle here that she loves to put in here. Anyhow, so yeah, let's dive right in and let's get started. So before we really dive into this, I do want to remind everybody that this is a space for the messy and the honest, the uncomfortable, and the healing. And the real kind of healing, not the slapping a Band-Aid on it and going out into the world and pretending like everything is okay. Because as I've learned, that never works. You can't lie to the universe about who you are, as it will keep sending you the exact same lessons, just in different forms, until we learn to make a different choice and until we learn the lesson. So if any of you are wondering who I am and were wondering why her, who does this girl think that she is to be coming on here and talking about this stuff, I want you to know that I'm someone who has fought damn hard to be where I'm at today. And I don't take a second of the time and effort that I've put into my healing journey for granted anymore. And I can tell you that I am grateful for every single bit of pain, every heartbreak, every lesson that I have had to learn, because it has turned me into and shaped me into one hell of a woman that I'm proud of. Some of the things I've been through would have probably killed other people, or, there's been a point in my life where I actually have died. I was in a coma for a few days, or so I'm told. The entirety of that story is a little unclear, but we'll get into that, as it came from an unreliable source, we'll say. All I know is what I actually remember in that time period. But anyhow, I'm glad you're here. So let's dive in. So there was a moment in my life where everything got really quiet. It was we'll call it the sacred pause before the true unraveling of everything I had known and everything I had learned to be. I was sitting in a jail cell, and it felt like my entire life had flashed in like a movie reel. And I remember I was laying on the floor and with that fucking wool blanket that is just so comfy, let me tell you. And every choice, every pattern, every single way I had hurt people and even myself flashed into my head. And I remember thinking, I cannot keep living like this. And it wasn't because someone told me to change. It wasn't actually because I was in jail. But it was because something inside of me finally woke up. And that is the moment that is really the catalyst for my change. But let me back up a little, because I've lived probably 20 different lives in one lifetime, hence the life of a 33 life path. I started off as the spoiled granddaughter. My grandparents raised me with my aunt, Angie, who was a paraplegic. She was in a wheelchair, so she was basically bedridden. And my grandparents worked very, very hard to take care of me and her and support us. And they really showed me what unconditional love is, because they didn't have to take me. They didn't have to accept me when my mother didn't want me, we'll say. Looking back, I really took them for granted and the love that they gave me. But, as a child, with my father being absent, I had never met him. And my mother, in and out of the picture, and she didn't raise my little brother, his father did, and he came over on the weekends. But my 3 little sisters, she raised them with her boyfriend for the first part of their life. And eventually my grandmother took care of them as well. But anyways, I really took them for granted, and I really screwed them over pretty badly. My grandfather passed away when I was about 17, and I left my grandmother to deal with that on her own, because I was just so ready to go be free And I think it was because I was so like, my grandma was very overprotective, which I understand now, which I understood when I became a parent with my ex. I really just couldn't wait to get out there and actually experience life. So then I got with this guy when I was 16-ish, and they like wrong side of the tracks family, truly. They were well known in the very small town that I grew up in Illinois, but not known in a great way. His whole family in and out of jail, and thought it was so cool. And I even myself remember saying, oh yeah, I bet I'll be in jail by the time I'm 23. And as we know, words are spells, and, or at least I believe they carry a vibration. And I actually know that my words and intentions manifest pretty quickly, actually. So at any rate, so yeah, I got with the wrong guy and just really made some terrible choices. And then I went, started to turn it around, went into college. We moved back in with my grandmother after living with his mom. And that was my first taste of actually having to take care of myself. Well, and him. He didn't want to work. Which actually, now that I'm saying that out loud, other than one person I was with, that was the theme in my life, actually, was whoever I was with, they did not want to work. And I was the caretaker, which is funny because that's actually what I was modeled as a child because, well, my grandparents took care of the family equally, right? But my grandma was always home. My grandfather was a truck driver, so he'd be gone sometimes all week. And so, yeah, so I got with this woman when I went to college because I realized that in that time period, I labeled it as I was a lesbian. And boy, did that send me down another dark time because I was so confused. I left the guy that I was with, got with this girl, and she was a stripper. And of course, I was not going to let that relationship go anywhere because, well, Stephanie with her abandonment issues from her mother, just wanting to be loved and accepted by everyone. And I did have such a big heart. I mean, I still do. It just got kind of clouded by alcohol and drugs for a while. Not the point. So yeah, I figured out that I was a lesbian and started stripping because she was a stripper. And I was like, I remember how it happened. One day I was so pissed that she kept going and working at the strip club. I would sit at home just fretting and stewing, of course, worried she was cheating on me, worried about just everything that comes with that lifestyle. And obviously I had some serious self-worth issues. So I was like, I remember talking to my cousin one day, and who also was a stripper. And I was like, oh, so you want to teach me how to do this? Because I'm going to show her exactly what this feels like. And that I did. I did it quite well, I might add, for being a stripper in the Midwest. It's not really saying much, but I did what I did, and I did it very well, even down to the partying and the drinking, which I wasn't much of a drinker before then. But when you've got a bunch of old men, trigger warning, basically trying to molest you all night, what do you think is going to happen? Of course, you're going to start drinking or doing drugs or whatever it is. Plus, it's like a whole giant party theme, or at least I viewed it that way while I was working at the club. And that's when I really started being kind of a shitbag, not going to lie, because I felt so wanted and it filled that void that I had, which, looking back in hindsight, I don't know why I felt such a void, because my grandparents loved me so much. Like, you couldn't have told my grandmother that I was not her daughter. And my grandfather either. He used to every weekend he'd come home, and one of our routines were that he would take me to the movies. Almost every weekend we would go to the movies. And definitely every weekend we would, excuse me, after Sunday school, he would take me, we would go out to breakfast. That was our routine every week. Go out to breakfast. And I remember I always looked forward to that. So back to being a stripper. Yeah, I felt so wanted, and people did want me. And I was in a, at that point, a long-term relationship, we'll call it, and we were committed. And then I started cheating. I was so happy that other people wanted me, and let's face it, you just figure out you're a lesbian, you're working around a bunch of naked women, and you feel like a kid in a candy store. You're just like, oh my God, okay, I'll try that, and I'll try that, and I'll try that. I laugh now. It was not great. I hurt her deeply, and, she cheated. There was definitely physical abuse in that relationship. I remember one time, like the first, if I recall this correctly, this was the first time I ever put my hands on her. In return, I had blacked out drinking Jack Daniels, and she had hit me, and I just remember, again, trigger warning, everybody. This entire episode is probably a trigger warning, so let me just preface all of this with that, okay? So I remember I was in between the walls, between the kitchen and the bathroom, because she had pushed me, and I just blacked out. And the next thing I knew, I wake up the next day and she's got a black eye. I've got scratches, bruises. It was awful. And that was, honestly, it was a pretty toxic relationship, right? You can't have two strippers in a relationship and it be very healthy. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but just that whole entire lifestyle is not safe. It's not, it seemed fun in my early, 18 to 22, but it's not fun. I would not recommend. But that's when life really started hitting hard. And when I tell you that life hit hard, it hit hard, you guys. I was drinking, so I was stealing, which I learned from the first guy that I was with. And, even my ex-girlfriend and I, because that's the life, when you're a stripper, that's the life. Literally your job is to lie and manipulate everybody around you, because that's your money. You got to put on the good face and act like you want this person and act like you want that guy. Even if it was a fucking farmer who smelled like shit. God, I mean that too. That was, if you couldn't tell with the way I said that, that was a very personal experience that I had. And I just remember thinking in that moment, I'm like, this can't be it, right? This can't be it. It was disgusting. But that's what led me to getting my first DUI. My ex and I were fighting, and I was an hour and a half away from home. And we had a knockdown, drag out fight. Okay. It was not good. And we got kicked out of the club. Anyway, so she was driving. We pulled over. She's actually beating my ass in a church parking lot when the cop pulled up. Cop doesn't say anything about what's going on. He just wants to know who's driving the car because the car was still running. So I still don't know why I did this, but whatever. I said I was driving. Oh, yes, I do. I know why. It was because I had a license, and she did not have a license, but I was super drunk, and she was not as drunk as me. But I was 19 at the time, and I didn't think that the cop could smell the alcohol on me. Anyways, long story short, I went to jail. My grandma came and bailed me out, as she did many times after that, because I kept going on the run. I got a second DUI. I went on the run from that. I did my little 30 days in jail, went out on probation, started doing the exact same shit. I just wasn't ready to change, right? I was not ready to change. So eventually my ex and I had broken up, And then because of my poor choices and me not being ready to change, I voluntarily said, I was like, you know what? Send me to prison. How about we just send Stephanie to prison, because I'm not going to keep doing this shit. Going to jail, getting back out, you know. So then I ended up dating not one, but two people who had taken someone else's life, which I mention this to you because I had an insane amount of understanding for people making poor choices when that's not their actual heart, right? And they were just fucked up. They were hurt. They were, you know, like the first girl, she was in a gang and she was doing 30 years for, she had actually did the final blow to the person with a beer bottle, I think it was, and that's what actually had killed him. And she wanted, do you know why she was in that gang? Because she just wanted to be accepted. She had abandonment issues too. You know, and I remember her telling me the story, and I mean, we were already dating before I knew that that's what she was in there for, because in there you don't ask, don't tell, whatever. Plus here I am in there for small potato stuff, and I'm in with all these women who had done really terrible, awful things. And that's not to say that DUIs aren't terrible, because they really actually are, okay? Like, and I had stolen from people, you know? I was in there because of my poor choices. So that's not to lessen anything I done, but I definitely didn't kill anybody. So, yeah, but then, and then the second woman that I was actually super in love with, I was so in love with her, but I had mommy issues too, real bad. So she was older than me. She was like, I don't know, like 10 years or 13 years older than me, something like that. And I had mommy issues so bad, and I still was just wanting to be accepted so badly that I would have done anything. And I definitely didn't want to lose anyone. Plus I had this like savior complex, which I don't know where that came from. Probably my grandma saving me and all of my other siblings. But yeah, so then the second woman that I dated that had killed someone, she was on meth, like strung out on meth for a few days in a row. And I think she told me maybe like a week. Anyway, so then the guy that she was with was super abusive. Like, he was abusing her. And one night she just snapped and she stabbed him. She killed him. And I also could understand that. Like, I was like, oh, well, one, you're not in your right state of mind. I think after like 24 hours of being awake with no sleep, you're like legally impaired, essentially. And then, so imagine, you know, and I had definitely, I mean, I hadn't done meth at that time, but I had definitely been strung out on coke, because, you know, gotta wake up after drinking all night at the club, right? So I understood, you know. So I say all this to say that I've always had this immense amount of understanding for people making bad choices and doing the things that they do and really regretting it later, because that's not who they actually are at their core. And I don't believe that anybody actually is bad at their core. I think that when people make these choices, even like the worst of the worst people, unless they're like soulless people, which I don't really know where I stand on the line with that, but we all do things that we're not proud of, some worse than others, and we never know someone's story, right? And most times we don't even stop to ask. So even when I left prison, well, guess what I did? I went right back to that stripper pole, because I needed to take care of the love of my life that I was just so sure I was going to be with forever and ever. Oh, I laugh now because it was just so silly. It was just so silly. And again, you know, this made me who I am today. And I'm really able to hold space for people and their mistakes. And you know, this is how I was able to hold space for myself when I really started doing the work and parenting my inner child, you know, because my mother wasn't going to fucking do it. Anyhow, so after I had gotten out of prison, it wasn't long after my grandma, maybe like a year later, I don't know. But anyhow, my grandmother had passed away, and I was with my first wife, which, yeah, I've been married twice. Won't do it again. Will definitely make the commitment again. Will not legally marry anyone again. I'm not going to say never, but I got to say I don't think it's a good idea. Sharon and I touched on that in the last episode. And I forgot to mention that even before that, my aunt that I was basically raised like as my sister, she passed away too. So my grandfather had passed away in 2008, and then my aunt passed away while I was in rehab, because yes, I went to rehab, rightfully so. I definitely needed it in that time period. She passed away. She'd gotten pneumonia and she died. It was very sudden. It was like within 48 hours she was gone. And then just a couple years later, my grandmother had passed away, and that was my rock. That was my best friend. That woman, you could have told her that I killed someone right in front of her face, and she would have defended me and been like, no, she didn't. My Steffi girl wouldn't do that, which I know isn't super healthy, but whatever. Don't come for her. She was just trying to love me the best that she could. Okay, so stay out of my comment section about her. Just want to make that abundantly clear. Anyways, so yeah, so loss is something that I have known and had an ongoing relationship with grief for the last 15 years. Actually, we'll go probably 17 years of my life, because that moment in that jail cell when everything flashed in my head like a movie and I decided I was going to change, because rock bottom didn't even explain it. I was in my own personal hell that I had created for myself. But I tell you what, you guys, when I decided to change, and that I knew my heart, and that my grandparents had raised me so much better than that, that's where my journey really, really, really began. And right around that time is when I met in that time period was the love of my life. And I can tell you that I still love her and those kids so, so much. Not in love with them. And yes, I'm still healing, and I have healed a lot from that. But that relationship really set the tone for the next 8 years of my life. And it was also the most love I have ever experienced to this day. But it was also the most toxic relationship I had ever experienced. And I can promise you that's the last toxic relationship I will let myself experience. When you're in survival mode, you just don't always make the best choices, right? So you've got two people. She was just figuring out that she was a lesbian, and since I was from such a small town, these people, two different people who didn't even know each other, were like, hey, I know a lesbian. It's Stephanie. You should reach out to Stephanie. And so we got into a relationship very quickly. We moved in together really quickly. I don't know if you guys have ever heard the joke, but it's, what does a lesbian bring to a second date? A U-Haul. Because it just moves so fast. I'm convinced that it's because of the emotional connection. Like, for me, like, I connected with a woman so much deeper. Like, the connection was just so much deeper than it is with a man. For me, let me reiterate, I'm not saying it's like this for everybody. I'm just saying for me it was. Okay, so we moved in together really quickly, and we'll say the kid's a sperm donor. I knew very quickly that if I wanted to be in this relationship, I was going to have to step up and be a mother to these children, which, I mean, for where I was at in my life, that was a big ask, but damn it, did I try? I did it. And I loved those kids. I still love those kids with all of my heart. They really showed me what unconditional love was. Being able to love 2 children as your own, and I don't give a shit. Like, I've had people tell me till they're blue in the face, well, they're not your kids. You couldn't know what it's actually like to be a mother until you've had your own kids. I call bullshit. Because I literally stayed in a super physically abusive relationship. At a lot of points, it was because I didn't want to abandon them. I didn't want to leave them. I didn't want to lose them. I loved them so much. And I loved her so much. And I loved them because they were a part of her. And no matter how fucked up I was still in the beginning of that, because I was still, drinking more than what I should have. Not like all the time, but I was still definitely drinking as a coping skill, to like deal with my shit. And I was still grieving over the loss of my entire family that I hadn't actually dealt with because I was so far gone away from myself that, I still had a lot of healing to do. Okay. And when you take 2 people who have abandonment issues, have mommy issues, but love each other, it doesn't lead anywhere good, we'll say, because we obviously were only able to love each other as deeply as we loved ourselves, and that was not very deep. We didn't love ourselves, and you could see that play out in our relationship, but we loved those kids, and she struggled with, she used to say she was bipolar. I don't like to label things, but we all have our own opinions. She would frequently try and diagnose herself with like it was autism and then it was bipolar, and it was, sometimes it was used as an excuse, which I vehemently would call bullshit on, just because I don't care what your mental illness is. I don't care what trauma you have. Being physically abusive to someone is never okay. And I learned that in my first relationship with a woman, because I too was physically abusive back to her once it had started. And with my first wife, we'll get into that in another episode, and I will go into more detail about all of these experiences and break down the lessons and things like that I've learned, because that is a huge point and part of this podcast. But just for this episode, I'm giving you the overview, right? So we were both carrying an immense amount of pain and unhealed wounds. And we loved each other so much. And we kept trying. We kept trying. We kept trying for each other. We kept trying for the kids. Now, if you were to ask her, maybe she wouldn't see it this way, and that's fine. It's like the beach ball, right? Like, you see red and yellow, I see green and blue. All right. I would like to believe that she actually loved me in the way that she said she did, and I know damn well that I loved her and those kids. Still do, in the ways that I've said that I did. We had a really poor way of expressing it. Matter of fact, in her being physical, oh my goodness, words, in her being physically abusive with me, I remember thinking that she loves me so much that she can't handle her emotions when she gets triggered out of fear of losing me. Now, part of that may be true. Still does not excuse it. I'm not making any excuses for this, okay? But again, that was another time frame where I understood the pain that she was experiencing. I understood why she was doing the things that she was doing and the actions that she took. And I want to say that just because we understand why someone does the things that they do does not mean that they get to be allowed in our life. And I am very aware of that. And there was also some spiritual shit in there that I held on so heavily to, because she had introduced me to the whole twin flame terminology and, you know, kept telling me, well, you're my twin flame. It's normal for us to go through this. This is what happens with twin flames, which fucking woof, looking back on it, like, oh my God, twin flames or not, I don't give a shit. None of that should have ever happened. Now, yes, good for the soul growth. Yes, I believe in soul contracts. I also believe in free will. So did all of it have to happen? No. Did we keep choosing to allow ourselves to put each other through that and accept what we thought we deserved in that time period? Absolutely. I tell you all of this to bring it back around to, yes, I've read books. I've read personal growth books till I'm blue in the face. I have listened to TED Talks. Excuse me. I have done a lot of research to back up all of the lessons and experiences and things that we'll be talking about in further episodes on this podcast. Okay. But all of the books, all of the podcasts, none of it matters like the actual experiences that I had. The books helped put the things into perspective for me. Okay. But that inner work, that's where the growth comes from. Okay. And this is why I say that we have to experience the duality of life. We can't know great love without knowing great suffering. We can't know great joy without knowing deep unrest, right? And again, one of these things, one of those times in my life that I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for the love that we had. I'm grateful for the experience of being a mother, you know? And no, I don't still have the kids in my life now. Anytime we had broken up, it was, you know, I was cut off from the kids, except this last time I had brought her out to New York because this relationship was the catalyst for me moving to New York. I had experienced so much darkness and trauma and loss in Illinois that I was like, I got to get out. I've got to get out of here. I can't. It was like I was in this auditorium with all these people yelling and screaming and, you know, throwing bottles at me and, you know, throwing paper wads and spit wads at me. And it was just so loud to me. And all I kept envisioning was leaving anywhere. It didn't matter, but just getting the fuck out of there. And every time I pictured it, it was like the stage lights going off, the auditorium being quiet, and it being just me left with my own thoughts. And it was also like I couldn't escape my past. Not that I was trying to escape it, but the more healing and growing I would do, I just had people that knew me from that past version of me that just kept bringing it back up. And they were like, oh, do you remember when this? Like even my mother, you know, I overdosed and I died. And when I had introduced her to my ex, the one with the kids, she said, oh, hey, Stephanie, we weren't even talking about it. I shit you not. We weren't even talking about it. She goes, oh, hey, Stephanie, do you remember that time that you overdosed and died? And I looked at my ex and she looked at me and we were like, what the fuck? Like, where did that even come from? You know, but that's just a really good example of people can't understand the depth at which someone can change unless they themselves are capable of that change. And I realized that I was surrounded by people who were not capable, not to say not capable, but who weren't changing in the ways that I was trying to change. Right? So I knew I had to get out. I knew I had to go. And I ended up being in New York, which I didn't pick New York. New York chose me. Another story for another time. But when I got here, the only thing that changed was my address. Because I promise you, all of that messy shit came with me. And when you are left alone in an unfamiliar place with unfamiliar people in unfamiliar territory, oh, the shadows that come out, let me tell you. And that was when the real deep-seated change happened. Okay. And also New York did weird shit to me. Remember how I told you I was a lesbian? Well, when I moved to New York, that's when the labels went away, because I realized that man or woman doesn't matter. I'm attracted to someone's soul and how they treat me and how they show up and the connection we have. Because I fell in love with my neighbor, who was an older man. And I still love that man to this day. We're best friends. Love him so much. Sharon disagrees. Sharon thinks I should not have anything to do with him. But he really didn't do anything to me like that. Like, yeah, he was selfish. And yeah, but I kept asking him to give me something that he wasn't capable of giving me, which is, it's fine, But that's just another example of having an immense amount of understanding and being able to meet people where they're at, which is a tool and a skill that I think all of us really need in times like this, because if not, all hope is lost, because we've all got shit. We've all got shit. We've all got stuff that we've done that we regret. We've all have these sides to us that, no, we don't like. That, yeah, we need to accept that that's where we're at, but it can be changed. It can be fixed. It can be worked on, and it all boils down to healing and putting in the consistent work, which is how I became a coach. Back to that toxic relationship with my ex, with the kids, as toxic as it was, there was still so much love, and she was so supportive. And, that's how I became a life coach. We used the last bit of our savings from taxes and paid for me to go to coaching school. Now, it's questionable I do question sometimes. I'm like, was she supportive because she actually thought I could do this? Or was it because that was the assurance that she didn't ever have to go back to work? Because she did stay home. I worked 90% of that relationship. I worked so that she could stay home with the kids, because fuck the education system. I'm sorry if you're a teacher. I appreciate the work you do, but I'm a firm believer that the shit that they teach you in school is genuinely just to keep you small and stuck in the system. They don't teach you about emotional intelligence. They don't teach you how to heal emotionally. They don't teach you any of the things that you're actually going to use out in the real world to prepare you for life. So anyways, we had this idea of how we wanted, the kids to live, because again, I loved them as they were my own. So I tell you all of this to wrap this up, okay? I tell you all of this to give you a little insight into what has built me into the woman I am today, and why I want to bring my story to the table and share it with you, because I am proof that it doesn't matter what you've done, doesn't matter where you've been, it doesn't matter how beaten and broken you feel by life. You can rebuild as many times as it takes, and you can do it in your own way. So with that, I want to thank you again for showing up every day. Thank you for showing up and bringing yourself into this world, because this world is not easy. It is cruel sometimes. But you know what? When you meet the actual people who are going to love you, and you meet the people who authentically present themselves to you and want to build a genuine connection with you, that's what makes all of this worth it. Learning to love yourself is such a journey. And could I love myself better? Oh, 100%. I make mistakes all the time. I make choices that, nothing crazy, but I'm not a big fan of alcohol, but do I still have a drink or two occasionally? Yeah. Do I hate it after? Yep, sure do. But sometimes I just am like, I want to check out. I just want to have a couple drinks, let my shoulders drop, and check out. Is that loving myself? No, because alcohol is poison. Do I still do it sometimes? Yeah, absolutely. But the life I have now is a life worth waking up to. It's not perfect. I'm not some millionaire who has, the fancy house, the fancy car, nor do I even give a shit about that. All I want in my life are genuine connections, a genuine love for myself, to show up authentically every day in alignment with my higher self, with truth, integrity, respect, and kindness for all humans, any living creature, nature, it doesn't matter, okay? I want the things in life that I'm going to remember at the end of my life as being valuable and showing up with love. At the end of the day, I want to love and be loved. And don't we all want that? And I want to help you. I want to help others. I want to help that person who just got out of prison and is like, oh my God, I can't believe that I just fucked up that bad. Like, how am I ever going to do this? Like, how can I rebuild? I'm never going to get a job. Believe you me, you will get a job. You're going to have to maybe work some jobs you don't want to work for a while, but it's part of the rebuild. Anything can be accomplished so long as you show up authentically, do the work on yourself, and learn to love yourself. And this is why I have this podcast. It's not for the people. I mean, it is. It's for everybody. But I didn't make this podcast in the hopes of reaching the millionaires who already have all of their shit, so they think, figured out, or, just I created this podcast so that the people who feel alone, who don't feel safe, who don't feel loved, who don't feel like they can ever amount to anything, I want to walk that walk for you. I want to be here as the example and the leader for you, to show you that it can be done. And for you all to know that I love you, that someone, I don't care if I know you or if you know me, I love you. And I'll say it again. I love you, and I'm proud of you. I'm grateful that you exist. And I hope that this podcast helps you to find some sort of peace and to just release a little, even just a little bit of the shame that we all carry around day after day, because God knows we're all hard on ourselves, right? And if you're not, good on you, then you've made it to a place I haven't yet, because I'm still hard on myself, but I give myself a lot of grace, Anyhow, I really appreciate you all showing up and listening to this. And I promise you I will go more in depth and break these life lessons down into episodes. And Sharon will get on here with me again and we'll talk about some more of this stuff. But let's stop judging people for what things look like on the outside of their life. That's my call to action for you. Go out today and show up with love. Show up with your whole heart. And if nothing else, just stop. If you feel yourself judging someone, just pause and wonder, why are they in that position right now? Because a lot of times, it's because they've been through it and their survival mode kicked in and they were making choices out of survival. And if any of you have ever been there, it's not an easy place to be, is it? And with that, I'm going to end this podcast here. And just remember, you can be and do anything that you desire in this lifetime because you are the creator of your reality. You got to show up for yourself. And you got to love yourself, because I promise you, another lesson I've learned, even with all the people in your life, at the end of the day, when you lay down at night, and you wake up in the morning, you've only got you. Yes, you might have your husband or your wife or your kids, but you came into this world alone. You're going to go out the exact same way, okay? You might be surrounded by loved ones. You might not be. But you have to sit with yourself, and you have to sit with your choices. I love you guys so much. I'm grateful you were here. And until next time, I love you and be well.